Hello, welcome. When creating content for this video, I remember one guy who told me that strangers often mention the names of Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn because they must have had bad experiences with them. That's why he must have said so. Today, I'll explain how Rahu and Ketu shape our lives. In the first or seventh house, they control energy and karma. Rahu is about experiences, Ketu about desires. Their chart positions, including trines and aspects, are vital. We'll also discuss the midpoint from their placement. Whenever we talk about the axis of Rahu and Ketu, like if Rahu and Ketu are in someone's first or seventh house, they are controlling that 1-7 axis. Or if they are in the sixth and 12th houses, they are controlling the 6-12 axis. A lot of our energy gets invested in that axis because our experiences and present karma are connected there. Rahu represents our experiences, and Ketu represents what we actually want, where our attention and focus remain completely, and we desire that house. So we look at those houses karmically. They can be karmically good too, provided they receive good energy there, because both these energies work in cycles. Similarly, their trines are also given importance. They create relationships with their trines. In many cases, Rahu and Ketu are aspected from the 3-11 position, and some people even say that Rahu gives a glance to the previous house, so it aspects the 12th house. In a way, the entire house, the entire chart gets covered. We'll discuss the midpoint. Degrees affected. Whatever are the degrees of Rahu and Ketu, in the 4th and the 10th, from them, in the 4th or the 10th of both, that is, in their midpoint, the planet and the house coming in that degree, or house comes in the midpoint. I will explain how it works and the energy you feel. We'll discuss differences in the Rahu Ketu axis and at their midpoint. Why are midpoint problems more challenging? We will also discuss what difference is there in Rahu Ketu axis and what difference is there in the midpoint of Rahu Ketu. Whenever problems arise at the midpoint, why do they become more challenging? You see, if there is a problem, right, at the very start of any task, we will feel it. Maybe this is not a good omen. In the north, I should also be left out. Or you get a sense that this task isn't easy. Its struggles are going to come. If problems arise in the very last stage of any work, then you know that a lot of work has already been done. Now, whatever needs to be done, however it needs to be done, when problems arise at the midpoint, we are neither on this side nor that side, which makes it very difficult. It seems like half the work was done very efficiently. There was no problem. Now, we can't go back, and we have to move forward, but it's so difficult. This is the kind of problem that arises when issues come up at the midpoint, because it creates a kind of stuck energy, a feeling of being unable to either let go or move forward. I get such a feeling. Let's talk about this concept of what a midpoint is and how it appears on a chart. Rahu and Ketu create the midpoint, and here we feel a kind of stuck feeling. It's important because it's not necessary for a midpoint to be present in every chart. Where Rahu and Ketu create a midpoint, there may or may not be a planet or house involved, so these degrees become more significant. You will find the axis of Rahu and Ketu in every chart. The less something is present, the more its importance increases. Now, when we talk about axis, there is a direct involvement of Rahu and Ketu. In that direct involvement, they play a direct role or significance. When both planets are in axis, they can be positive or negative. Rahu thrives in the 7th, 3rd, trine, 11th, and financial houses and signs. Rahu thrives in the 7th, 3rd, trine, 11th, and financial houses and feels good in certain signs. Receiving such a sign and house makes them feel positive. Just like Rahu feels good in the 7th house, good in the 3rd house, works well in trine houses, is good in the 11th house, does well in the financial trine houses, and also feels good in the signs and financial signs by itself. So now, if they are receiving such sign and house, then they feel good. And if they also get a good sign, good house, along with good associations, then this access will work for my benefit, for my growth. If they get a good sign and house, they feel good. With friendly associations, their positive energy is enhanced. This access benefits my growth and I shouldn't face problems here. I should expect growth because Ketu brings past experiences and Rahu helps fulfill deep desires. So this access will work for my good, for my growth. And it's not necessary that I face problems in this area. In fact, I should expect growth from this access because Ketu brings our experiences. And by using those past experiences, Rahu allows us to fulfill our deep desires. So now, how do we identify this? The method to identify it is very simple. What I need to do is look at the degrees of Rahu and Ketu. For example, let's take a case where Aries is rising and Rahu is in the ascendant at 5 degrees, while Ketu is in the 7th house in Libra at 5 degrees. Now I need to catch the midpoint between Aries and Libra. So the signs that create a relationship of 4-10 with each other are Cancer and Capricorn. This means that at 4 degrees Cancer and Capricorn are at 5 degrees. And the planets that fall within this range are coming to my midpoint, and I will also consider a plus minus of 3 to 4 degrees. This concept applies to Kalpurush coding and your rising sign. Capturing a 5-degree range needs a 3 to 4 degree variance. Cancer's range is 2 to 8 degrees, and Capricorn's range is captured. Now, if I have captured this 5-degree range, I also need to consider a plus minus of 3 to 4 degrees. This means that I will capture the range of Cancer from 2 degrees to 7 or 8 degrees, including the 1 degree range. If there is a planet placed here, it will come into the midpoint. All right, now I need to check if the house is coming into the midpoint or not, for which I will have to look at the degree of the ascendant. Similarly, if my ascendant in Aries is at 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, or 5 degrees, it means it's falling within the range of 2 to 8 degrees, which is a plus minus of 3 to 4 degrees from 5 degrees. So my 4th house and 10th house will also come into the midpoint. So the degree of the planet, along with the degree of the house, is also important to determine whether it is coming into the midpoint or not. Let's understand this in another way. My rising sign is in Aries, and Rahu is placed in my 11th house. In the sign of Aries, the place is at 5 degrees. So now my midpoint will fall between the 2nd house and the 8th house, provided that my ascendant degree is also around 5 degrees plus or minus 3 to 4 degrees. If my ascendant's degree isn't close to Rahu's, I'll exclude that house. But if a planet is within range, like Rahu at 5 degrees and Mars at 7 degrees, Rahu will be midpoint. But if a planet is placed within that range, let's say that in a Gemini rising, Rahu is placed at 5 degrees in Aries and Mars is placed at 7 degrees in the 2nd house. This means that now Rahu, which is at 5 degrees, will come into the midpoint. So the important point I was talking about will definitely be felt by Mars, and we can see how it works by looking at the charts. All right, now, this sensitive zone created by Rahu and Ketu is known as the midpoint. In this, mostly negative results are felt because it is not necessary for there to always be a planet or a house at this degree. But if there is any house or planet that comes, you will also consider the lordship of that planet. Basically, if Mars is coming in, for Gemini rising, their lordship is in the 11th house and their lordship is in the 6th house. So those two houses also got involved because their lords have come into the midpoint. Consider the house rulership, meaning which planet rules it. These 3 ways impact the planet and their challenges have to be faced. Things don't get resolved in one go, or the work gets stuck halfway. There's a feeling of a block and paralyzed energy. Feeling stuck arises when solutions are unclear, leading to challenges. At a midpoint, a house affects its lord, blocking progress. House reflections involve planets. If my 4th and 10th houses are at midpoint, it impacts home and career. Consider the 10th house when the 4th is at midpoint. If Rahu traps me, check if Saturn is weak. When a solution isn't found, a midpoint arises, increasing challenges. If reflection occurs, bringing a house to this point affects its lord, paralyzed energy, and negative combinations hinder progress. Half the work is done, but progress halts, wasting efforts. House reflection involves planet reflection. If my 4th and 10th the stagnant energy, its negative combinations, will ruin me. Efforts seem wasted, and years of hard work feel wasted. The reflection of houses also involves the reflection of planets. Understand this. If my 4th and 10th houses are coming to the midpoint, I will discuss home and career by law. What should I do? Look at the 10th house. If I'm stuck in a loop because of Rahu, it traps me at the midpoint. Is my Saturn also weak? You can't move at the midpoint. Regarding the 4th house, check if my moon is also weak and if my 4th house is reflecting. If this loop is severe, if a planet like Venus is coming to the midpoint, check the 7th house, relationship spiral. Bhavesh theory leads to the midpoint. Applying this principle to the midpoint won't yield much. If a house enters the midpoint and its lord is well placed, you will overcome challenges after struggles. But if the lord or planet has unsupportive factors, like if Jupiter is at the midpoint, check support system as Jupiter indicates our support and responsibility. When I'm talking about the 4th house, I need to check if my moon is also weak and if there is any reflection happening in my 4th house. If this loop is very bad, and if a planet like Venus is coming to the midpoint, then I should check the situation of the 7th house, our relationship spiraling. Before saying that, I need to understand the situation. The continuity of our Bhavesh theory concept should also take you to the midpoint. If you apply this principle and say that it has come to the midpoint and spiraled, it won't give you that much result. So the whole idea is that if any house is coming into the midpoint zone and its lord is well placed, then after initial struggles, you will be able to overcome those challenges. But if the lord or the planet we are talking about has other factors that are not supportive, like if Jupiter is going to the midpoint, then we need to check before saying that you have no support system, because Jupiter tells us how much support system we will have in life or how responsible we will be. Before destroying the energy of that planet, let me tell you this finish. Make sure to check that house to see if we are getting support from there or not. Just like Jupiter signifies our husband who takes on our responsibilities, our father also takes on our responsibilities. Along with that, also calculate the energy of the 7th and 9th houses to see if they are getting affected negatively. Who is taking Jupiter towards destructive energy? Look at this chart. It will help you understand the calculations. The rising sign of my ascendant is 1922. This degree applies to each of my houses. Rahu and Ketu are at 18 degrees, adjust by 4 degrees. Now I need to add or subtract 4 degrees here. First, I will calculate the midpoint, and then the midpoint I got was established. After that, I will look at the houses and the 11th house and the signs that were formed. The zodiac signs are Aquarius and Leo. Here, at exactly 18 degrees in the sign of Leo and in the sign of Aquarius, I calculated the midpoint, and there should be a problem here. This range will be attempted to be spoiled by Rahu because my ascendant degree is 19. This means that the 5th and 11th houses and the sign of Leo are definitely coming to the midpoint. And when we are adding or subtracting 4 degrees, the Jupiter placed in the 5th house has also come into this problematic situation. When I see Jupiter in trouble, my attention will go towards the 3rd and 6th houses because they rule what problems might arise there. But because the 5th house is a very vital and important house for us, It represents our children, love affairs, and interests, where we show our maximum concern. The fact that it is going to the midpoint and the fifth house of the Kalpurush Kundali is also going to the midpoint, along with Jupiter going to the midpoint, indicates some trouble. Now, what I will look at is if my fifth house is going to the midpoint, then what is the situation of my fifth lord? My fifth lord is placed in the ninth house in a friendly sign and is retrograde. And when I talk about childbirth, I cannot forget that the sign of Gemini is a balanced sign and represents the energy of integration and trine over and over again. When I talk about the 11th house, I will look at the situation of the sign, that is the fifth house of the Kalpurush Kundali, and its lord is in a debilitation state. Although the debilitated Venus is also present, it won't provide much support, and Mars is also there. All of this is centered around the mother and the ascendant. Even after the debilitation, they couldn't have a child. After multiple trial and error attempts, even though the fifth lord is in Capricorn, a child was still not possible. Because my fifth house in the Kalpurush Kundali is in a sign ruled by a debilitated planet, and my fifth lord is in Capricorn, in the balanced sign and in D9, their situation in the quality of 7 wasn't very good either. But just if I talk about the midpoint, it acts as an add-on factor. And in my mind, when we talk about childbirth, the 11th house is also important because it is not only about desires but also the fifth house of our seventh lord. Our partner's fifth house indicates children. Look at this chart. The degree of the ascendant here is 8 degrees. This means that I will consider each house at 8 degrees while following equal house distribution. The degree of my Rahu and Ketu is 20 degrees. Check if planets in Leo or Aquarius are in the Rahu Ketu midpoint. Leo and Aquarius aren't coming. Check if other planets fall in this range. With 4 degrees from 20, Venus and Jupiter are caught in the midpoint. Now, according to this same range, I will check in the signs of Leo and Aquarius to see if there are any other planets coming into this range. If I do plus or minus 4 degrees from 20, then both Venus and Jupiter will get caught in the midpoint in the signs of Leo and Aquarius. Venus's ruler shape is 7, and 11, Jupiter's is 2nd and 5th. Check for reflection in the 2nd and 5th houses and link between the 7th and 12th houses. Because Jupiter and Venus are coming into conjunction, these houses will also start getting affected. Well, you see, one thing, Ketu is in the 7th house. Right. The deal that my 7th lord shows is 0. They are in the enemy sign and are placed in the 10th house, and they come into the midpoint, aspected by Saturn. Saturn naturally signifies delays. And due to this chart's 3rd lord, there will be an attempt to make extra efforts for recovery. Now, since Venus has come into the midpoint, Jupiter again signifies family, which is important not just for marriage but also for the 2nd and 7th houses, and it signifies children as well, being the 5th lord, so their marriage hasn't happened. He was in a relationship with a girl for a long time, but it couldn't convert into marriage. She could pledge, so my relationships after that never really blossomed, or there was never any trust in those relationships. So, when I was talking about the midpoint, you complete 50% of the journey, but can't reach completion, even when you come to the midpoint. I've seen that in their lives. It's like you're on a journey with someone towards a better future, but it never converts and never blossoms. And it gets stuck in between, which causes more pain. The 10 midpoint theory shows the ascendant at 6 degrees and Rahu at 4. Leo and Aquarius hit the midpoint. The ascendant is 6 degrees 45 minutes, placing the 4th house in Leo and Aquarius. Thus, the 4th and 10th houses have the midpoint as Rahu and Ketu's degrees are near the ascendant. 9 Poply notes Popsy done that actually notes Pop Sally done. In every chart I chose, it was only Leo and Aquarius at the midpoint, but any sign or house can be there. I chose Taurus for Rahu and Scorpio for Ketu. In this chart, the ascendant is 6 degrees and 45 minutes but that's not the case. Any sign or house can go into the midpoint. I think it happened this way because I chose Taurus for Rahu and Scorpio for Ketu. So in this chart, as I'm saying, the degree of the ascendant is 6 degrees and 45 minutes. And from there, the fourth house falls into Leo and Aquarius. In my chart, the fourth and 10th houses will have the midpoint because the degrees of Rahu and Ketu are very close to the degree of the ascendant. So when I look at the fourth and 10th houses, in the midpoint, of course, I will think about how the career house and life environment will be, and how good or bad the mental peace will be. When I look at the fourth lord, it is in the sixth house in a debilitated position, and it is with Saturn, which has animosity between the two, and there is no good relationship. So the Sun and Saturn won't bring each other into a more comforting position. But when my 10th lord is so strong in the 6th house, in a sign of exaltation, it's affected by the sun, which is the other lord, where the midpoint falls. So my work style and karma will not lack hard work, but Saturn indicates fame, and the 4th house is responsible for fame. So my hard work might not yield expected results. Consider the energy of the Kalpurush in this. When discussing Leo, Aquarius, or any sign, I check its position in Kalpurush and any issues in that house. This confirms the midpoint can reduce things, leaving you stuck without escape. Kalpurush energy can trap signs like Leo, Aquarius. When I'm talking about Leo, Aquarius, or considering any sign, I check where it falls in the Kalpurush and whether there are any problems in that house of the chart. This confirms that the midpoint can significantly reduce things, and you might end up stuck in that midpoint situation without being able to get out. Rahu and Ketu may just cause shifts. You must see to which house or which planet Rahu and Ketu are giving the energy of midpoint, who they are gripping. As there may be few issues with Rahu and Ketu, you might thrive there. It may just fluctuate. Energy is stuck. I invested a lot in this person, did a lot with them. But when we talk about the midpoint, there is completely stuck energy. I invested so much in her. I could have done so much with this person. I had worked so much on this, or why is it happening that I'm not getting any growth here? So, along with other reflections, definitely check the midpoint's influence. In the last chart, we saw if it doesn't bring me happiness. When talking about home, since I'm discussing the fourth house, I'm referring to the sun, which is the lord of the fourth house and is in a debilitation position. This will also lead to a deficiency because my situation is getting spoiled, it's weakening, and Saturn is taking the burden of the fourth house. If I want to flourish in my career, it can be the home environment and home responsibilities or my own mental state that is preventing me from growing. Because both the lords of my midpoints are together, selecting each other and affecting the sixth house, I hope you must have liked this new concept. Thank you much.